Welcome to the Nourished Fertility Podcast, your go-to podcast to get your period back, get pregnant, and become the healthy mom you dream of being. I'm your host, Victoria Myers, peer recovery specialist, fertility dietitian, and owner of the virtual coaching practice Nourished Fertility, where we work together to restore your fertility. Today, I have such a treat of a guest episode for you with Lily Nichols. Now, Lily, believe it or not, was back on the podcast way back in 2018, but obviously that was years and years ago. It was time for an updated episode, and I specifically asked her to come on the show to talk about her book, Real Food for Fertility. Especially for you, my community, you are, yes, pregnant and in the postpartum, but many of you are actually coming for fertility support and in that preconception phase. And while I love her book, Real Food for Pregnancy, Real Food for Fertility is by far my favorite of all the books she's provided. It is such a phenomenal resource for any woman in any path to fertility who wants to properly take care of their bodies as they lead to months or even years prior to getting pregnant. And if you're trying to get pregnant right here, right now, it is a phenomenal resource for you too. There's also wonderful resources on sperm quality, the things that your hubbies and partners can eat in order to improve their sperm quality. It is such a great resource. And obviously we love Lily's recommendation so much that they're really integrated into every custom fertility recovery protocol that we create for our clients. You'll see the fertility friendly foods that we actually go through in detail in this podcast in every single protocol that we create with our clients. We also recommend this book as a resource if you want to learn more of the specifics of why, but really this episode is going to be for any client of ours, but also any community members of ours. If you want to learn how to properly eat to nourish your body for fertility, this episode, it is my goal that this is your resource moving forward. Lily is a registered dietitian nutritionist, a certified diabetes educator, a researcher, and author with a passion for evidence-based nutrition that definitely comes across in this episode. Drawing from the current scientific literature and wisdom of traditional cultures, her work is known for being research-focused, thorough, and sensible. Lily's clinical expertise and extensive background in prenatal nutrition have made her a highly sought-after consultant and speaker in the field. You are going to enjoy this episode so much, so without further ado, let's jump into today's guest expert, Lily Nichols. Hello, Lily. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I should actually say welcome back because it has been almost 10 years, but you were once on the show a very, very long time ago. I want to say it was like 2017, 2018. I'll have to put the episode in the show notes. You were talking about your book, Real Food for Pregnancy. It was right when it came out though. So you tell me.
So that was 2018 then.
Okay. So 8 years ago you were on the show.
Not to date ourselves.
Well, it's a good sign, right? We've all been doing this for a minute, and now we're coming full circle. We're going to talk specifically about the book that you co-wrote, Real Food for Fertility. First, though, tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you do.
Sure. So I guess I've been around for a while. I'm a registered dietitian and a diabetes educator, and most of my work focuses on nourishing women of childbearing age throughout their reproductive life. As you mentioned, I have a couple books. So I have Real Food for Gestational Diabetes, Real Food for Pregnancy, and now Real Food for Fertility. A lot of people, I would say, know my work for being, somewhat critical of the dietary guidelines and really kind of zeroing in on nutrient-dense foods and things that really support and nourish your body on a deeper level, not just looking at, oh, we need X amount of calories, or, oh, you need to, limit this food or that food. I really try to focus on what we should be eating more of. So we have, the best hormones, the best fertility, the easiest pregnancies, simplest recoveries postpartum, an easeful transition into motherhood in a very nourished way. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you wrote this book. I love all of your books and I've recommended them, but I just feel like Real Food for Fertility, for everyone watching, please go get this book. It's just, I think it's the point where a lot of people needed more help. I'm so grateful that you and Lisa wrote this book because I do think it was almost even more so the place where a lot of people were confused and conflicted as to what to do. And I think fertility, as we all know, is becoming more and more of an issue, and more infertility cases are rising, and people just need to know how to eat. And there's a lot of, especially with my clients and in my world, I mean, they're so scared to eat the foods that we're going to discuss today. And my goal is that this is just such an empowering episode of why you need to be eating these foods because they are going to nourish your body in a way that's never been nourished before. Throw out the calorie counting, throw out the tracking. Let's just focus on real food and foods that properly nourish us. So, with that shared, we're just going to kind of go through each of the foods. You have a pretty significant chapter in this book where you go through a list of each of the foods you recommend consuming more of. So, we're going to go through like why and how to get more of them in the diet. First, before we do that though, what were your intentions? Like when you and Lisa envisioned this book, like what was your goals for why you wanted to get this book out in the world?
Well, it was a multi-year discussion before we even started
Really? Multiple
writing.
years?
Oh yeah, we were actually book writing buddies when I wrote Real Food for Pregnancy and she was writing The Fifth Vital Sign. We met, I think, almost weekly to keep ourselves accountable in the writing process. And we had always toyed with the idea of something together, maybe. She had wanted me to write a book on PCOS, and I was like, there's so many books on PCOS. Really don't need to do that. They should just read the gestational diabetes book, and it's the same sort of thing. That's usually my excuse with books, like, oh, they don't need another book. Just do this one, right? But there really is so much specific nutrition information relative to fertility that it really did warrant its own resource. We wanted to write it together because we have different areas of expertise. Lisa is an expert in the menstrual cycle and fertility awareness charting. I mean, her knowledge base on that is probably
Crazy.
equivalent to my knowledge base in nutrition in terms of depth. And we're both really highly obsessive with research and citing our sources. I mean, I think Real Food for Fertility ended up with over 2,300 research citations. It's just
Unreal.
nuts. Yeah, that's like a separate download over at realfoodforfertility.com. It's like 200 pages. It would have added 200 pages to the book if we had put all of them in there. So, anyways, we wanted like a one-stop shop for women and also men to go to get information on optimizing their fertility, tackling common menstrual cycle and fertility issues, and then also collating all the research on nutrition and lifestyle choices that really, move the lever, in the biggest way. I just find that so much of the fertility nutrition advice completely misses the mark. There's a lot of bias, and we could talk about this, but there's a lot of bias in the research against certain foods or specific nutrients. And some of the studies are even designed in a way to get the outcome that they want, but not the outcome that what clinicians actually see in practice. So I kept hearing from clinicians, hey, like I've noticed, the fertility and nutrition advice that these reproductive endocrinologists are giving are to eat plant-based, and then my clients lose their cycle or their cycle parameters get worse, and it's like, oh, you got to dive into all the nitty gritty on all that. And we could talk about that today, but we really just felt like we need a more accurate nutrition guide to fertility than what's out there. And yeah, so it came to be over many, many years of work. This is before the advent of AI. So this is 100% human researched, human written, no AI used. It's quite the volume.
I also couldn't imagine a world, Lily, where you personally let AI write you a book. Like you just correct me
No,
if I'm wrong here, but like that's just what I can't even imagine. I can't fathom that. You would never let that happen. You're like,
no,
no, I wrote every single page of this.
that's right.
So you actually did a great job of kind of segueing into like let's go ahead and get into the discussion and we'll go through the specific foods here in a moment, but let's touch on the plant-based recommendations because you're right, a lot of times reproductive endocrinologists are recommending more plant-based style eating or even sometimes the Mediterranean diet will be recommended too. And myself, many dietitians, obviously you as well, have a lot of issue with that. We actually want our clients eating more red meat. We want them eating more meat in general, all the foods that we're going to talk about today. Why do you think doctors gravitate more towards plant-based recommendations? And why do you feel such opposition to those recommendations?
So, like I mentioned, I think there are some pieces of research that have come out saying that plant-based proteins are better than animal proteins. And I read all of those studies, by the way, because it's like you want to take in not only the evidence that you feel is supportive of, you know, your own
Mm-hmm.
clinical observations, call it bias, but clinical observations, I'll call it that. And you also want to take in the evidence that's contrary to understand what's going on here. Okay, well, if plant proteins truly are more supportive of fertility, as some of these studies say, even in the name of the study, let me dive into that. What plant proteins? What variables did they control for? Was like how significant were the findings or not? And so we looked at those research papers. Like first of all, if you're looking at papers that are just following like an epidemiological thing, where it's just looking back at people's diet over time via, food frequency questionnaires or whatever, and then looking at health outcomes, we have something called the healthy user bias that gets intermingled with all this nonsense. So oftentimes the meat eaters are the ones who smoke cigarettes, they drink alcohol, they drink soda, more sugar sweetened beverages, they are inactive, maybe they eat more processed foods as a whole. You think of somebody who sits down to like a meal with a hot dog. You got the hot dog bun, you got the soda, you got the side of French fries. We might blame everything on the hot dog, but really there's a lot of other factors
Mm-hmm.
that may be playing into just overall diet quality and nutrient intake. So that's one of them. Some of these studies, like one in particular, uh, was looking at types of protein and risk of ovulatory infertility. And when you actually looked at their conclusion was that plant proteins are superior, so better ovulatory function in the group of women who ate more plant protein. This was a study that actually included their data table, like right in there, which some studies don't always. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
whatever they've written about in the results and description. You have to trust their data for what it is. But this had like the odds ratios for all the different types of protein and the relative risk for ovulatory issues. And not all plant protein was supportive of ovulatory function. Some of them were. Lentils and beans were supportive of ovulatory function, but you went down to soy proteins, you went to nuts and seeds, interestingly, and those were actually associated with worse ovulatory function.
Mm-hmm.
They called out red meat as being harmful. The risk ratio on red meat was pretty darn close to one. It was like in the, 90 percentile or something, 95%. And so close to one that it's not actually significant. It is net neutral effect on fertility. So they pulled, they came up with findings essentially out of thin air. Their report was not actually reflective of what they said. If you wanted an accurate statement from that study, you would say lentils and beans are supportive of ovulatory function. You know what else was highly supportive of ovulatory function in the study that they conveniently left out? If you're
What?
just going by their data set itself, processed meat actually performed great for ovulatory function, which is hilarious because processed meat is probably like the nutrition field's favorite villain of all time. And somehow the women who ate the most processed meat had the best ovulatory function. We don't know why that observation is what it is, and I'm not encouraging people to eat a ton of processed meat, but is it that those women were getting more saturated fat? You need, of course, fats to build your reproductive hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Is it that that group of women was not under eating and getting enough calories was supporting their ovulatory function? Is it the nitrates in the processed meat? I mean, that does actually enhance blood flow. People think nitrates are evil, but that does actually enhance endothelial function. Does it have something to do with that? I have no idea why, because there could be all sorts of garbage ingredients hiding in processed meats as well. But their study finding did not accurately reflect what they were saying it did. And what I think is important to also highlight on the flip side of the, people concerned about meat consumption and fertility is to actually observe the clients in front of you and see what their overall health
Mhm.
and their nutrient status, their ovulatory function, their menstrual cycle regularity, see what that's like in your people who are eating meat and in your people who are fully vegetarian. Because when you look at the data on vegetarians versus omnivores, you get a very clear picture of a more common occurrence of menstrual cycle irregularities and ovulatory issues in the vegetarians. Of course, diet quality is going to play a role in that as well. I'm not saying it's the only factor, but there are actually a number of key micronutrients in our animal sourced foods that are really highly supportive of our hormone production, the health of our ovaries, endometrial lining, inflammation, blood sugar, all the things um, we find, are actually of support. So if you want to get enough vitamin B12 and enough iron and enough zinc and enough choline and vitamin A and selenium and just enough complete protein and some of these key amino acids that have been found so crucial to the health of our reproductive tissues, it's really hard and sometimes impossible to get those on a fully plant-based diet. So, I mean, I like to look at the everything that a food is providing, not just singling out, one nutrient, because all of it counts, it's not enough to eat a crappy diet and add some meat in it and call that a fertility supportive diet. But we can have a middle ground where we take some of the, logical things we all know and understand about nutrition, like fresh antioxidant rich produce and fiber rich foods and whatnot, and also add in a sufficient amount of complete quality protein so this person has sufficient metabolic health, good micronutrient status, enough fat to support their hormone production, and find a middle ground here.
Yeah, yeah. Great advice and exactly what we would recommend too. Yes, eat the antioxidant rich fruits and vegetables. We'll talk about those plants today, but we also need to be eating animal-based products. So let's dig in. I'm kind of going to go through it. I'm definitely going to go through it just list by list of how you go through it in the book. You start first with the fertility friendly foods you recommend consuming of eggs. Why do you recommend eating eggs?
So many reasons. So I mean, you have the complete protein
Yeah.
being one key. It's also an easy sell, I think, for most women. Like women
Mhm.
are more likely to be averse to eating animal foods, and I think we've just absorbed a lot more diet culture
Mhm.
than men. So I find that eggs are usually like more acceptable to the average woman before I start talking about the other foods. So I don't want to suggest that the order in which the foods show up in the chapter is some sort of secret ranking
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
but
They're
eggs
all
tend to be an
important.
easy sell. Yeah. They are one of the richest food sources of choline, which is a B vitamin-like compound that's very important for our cell membranes, for our brain health, for our liver health. And so that does end up playing a role in egg quality as a whole. It it works in the methylation cycle, similar to how a lot of women of reproductive age are thinking about folate for the prevention of
Mhm.
neural tube defects. Choline and folate and several other nutrients work really closely together in some of these same nutrient metabolism pathways and in the methylation process. And that's really key for supporting egg and sperm quality and also prevention of some, genetic or congenital anomalies that can happen in pregnancy, like neural tube defects. We see those at a higher rate, not only in women who are low on folate, but also in women who are low in choline. So we want to get enough of that, from the get-go. But there's a whole slew of other nutrients that you'll find in eggs that are key. It's like great source of iodine, selenium, has some preformed vitamin A, has vitamin B12, has some DHA. The only other major place you're going to be finding DHA is seafood. So in individuals who aren't eating a whole lot of seafood, eggs can help to provide at least some, not a ton, but some DHA as well.
And these are all reasons to eat the whole egg and not the egg white. You're not going to be getting these benefits if you only eat the egg white.
Correct. And even the cholesterol within the egg is actually of a net benefit to fertility as well, because our reproductive hormones are built on a backbone of cholesterol. And so if you restrict cholesterol in your diet too much, you can start to see, decreased hormone production. So that is a net benefit.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. Okay, up next, the one that's probably always the one that I don't know, you'll have to tell me if this is true. I feel like people always freak out about the liver. Whenever we ask our clients to start eating liver, they're like, "What? Organ meat?" So tell us why we should be eating more liver and organ meats.
So this has shifted in recent years because when I was
Very
first,
recently.
yes, I mean, I've been writing about liver and organ meats for well over a decade. So Real Food for Gestational Diabetes came out in 2015, and I talk about liver and organ meats in that book. And that was met with far more disgust than and resistance than I see now. And
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
time, I think there was one brand of desiccated liver supplements, at least widely available, anyways. And now you got
So
like
many.
everybody has a desiccated organ supplement. I mean, it's insane. So I think the tide is turning a little bit. But essentially, the organs of animals tend to be far more concentrated in key micronutrients than the muscle meat. Liver being arguably the most nutrient dense of
Mhm.
all of the organ meats, but different organ meats have different nutrients that they happen to be particularly high in. So if we look at it from sort of an ancestral perspective, a lot of traditional cultures would save the liver or consume the liver first after a hunt and give it to people who had the greatest nutrient needs, like women who were going to fall pregnant or newly married couples or small children, knowing that it was such a solid storehouse of nutrients. And so if you look, just compare like on a micronutrient chart, like the amount of B vitamins, iron, zinc, choline, fat soluble vitamins
Sure.
in an ounce of liver versus an ounce of steak. I mean, it's a many-fold difference. Like B12, for example, it's like a 200-fold difference in the concentration of B12 in liver versus the muscle meat from the same animal. So we're really looking at it as like an a, an ingredient or a food to fortify your diet. And I want to say that because some people hear me talk about liver and organ meats and then they feel like they need to be eating like a giant slab of liver every single day. You
Hmm.
really don't need that much
How much do you
liver.
recommend?
Like 3 to 6 ounces a week, if you can, is fantastic. Like, I just want people consuming it on occasion as like again, a natural way to fortify their diet with a higher amount of vitamins and minerals, but it is not something you have to eat every single day.
Yeah.
Now, if you're taking desiccated organ supplements, maybe you are taking it every day, but it should work out to about an equivalent of maybe 3 to 6 ounces a week. It is very high in vitamin A, which people get super freaked out about. At 3 to 6 ounces a week, you're getting nowhere close to toxic levels of vitamin A, pregnant or not. Really, the time we're most concerned about it is in pregnancy. So that amount is a good amount to get your nutrient levels up, but you're not getting to a level so high that we're now creating issues. Because I will say, there are now people, I hear from them, who are eating liver every day and they're also supplementing with a desiccated organ supplement and they're also taking a super high quality prenatal vitamin that
No,
has high amounts of vitamin
no.
A. And I'm like, you don't need to be doing all the things at the same time. Like, pick, okay? Take your good prenatal, have a reasonable amount of liver. You don't need to do both a desiccated organ supplement and eat liver. Pick one of the two and we're good to go. People take things to extremes, I have learned. So I
Yep.
have
Yeah.
found I have to specify quantities.
I was going to say the same thing. I was like, I think that just points to how obsessive we can be as a culture. And we like hear this
Yeah.
recommendation, then we take it to extremes. And I'm grateful that you gave that. And I mean, we certainly say the same thing. It's like, it does not mean you have to eat it daily. It's just think of how we used to eat it. It would be in our diet a small handful of times per week. That's what we want to
Yeah.
try to replicate.
Or you think about it in the context of an animal. Okay, your family has harvested a cow and you get literally hundreds of pounds of meat off of a typical cow and you get one set of organs.
Yep.
that liver is maybe 4 to 8 pounds max. It depends on the size of the animal, but like you are getting hundreds of more pounds of meat than you are liver. It wouldn't make sense from an ancestral perspective that you're eating liver every single day or in super high quantities. It is relative to the proportion of muscle meat that you're consuming.
You've been told you need to gain weight, stop exercising, or do IVF to get pregnant with no period. What if I told you that's not actually true? You're tracking your food, working out, trying everything to be healthy, but your period is still missing. And now, pregnancy, it feels impossible. I know exactly how that feels because I've helped hundreds of women get their period back and get pregnant naturally. Inside my free training, I'm walking you through the exact 5-step method that's helped women like Lex, Lauren, and Stephanie restore their fertility in 90 days or less without extreme weight gain or giving up on movement. You'll learn what's really causing your missing period, why food freedom is essential for fertility, and the customized approach that actually works, even if you've tried everything. If your dream is to see 2 pink lines and hold a baby in your arms, this training, it's your first step. Click the link in the show notes to watch the free training. It's time to restore your period, your fertility, and your hope. Now let's get back to today's episode.
So I think that's another helpful reframe sometimes for people.
Yeah, I'm grateful you said that. Okay, up next, for my girlies that just want to eat chicken breast all day, why do you recommend meat on the bone, slow cooked meat, and bone broth?
Yes. So specifically the meat on the bone, the tough cuts of meat that require slow cooking to like soften up and be edible, and bone broth. The major thing that we're getting from these meats, of course, you're also getting, if you're eating meat on the bone, you're getting the same benefits that are in meat that's off the bone. But when it comes with the bone and that's been cooked with it and kind of like cooks down, you get some of the collagen and other things from that like tendon connection to the bone. You are getting that same collagen and gelatin into your diet. So you're getting a slightly different balance of amino acids that tends to be highly beneficial. Glycine is really vital for liver function specifically. So the creation of our major antioxidant in our body, glutathione, requires glycine as part of it. It requires some other things too, but glycine is often kind of like a rate limiting amino acid to how well our body can detoxify. And we all know we're being, assaulted with all sorts of chemicals in our air and water and food and cosmetics and all the things, that it is helpful to support our liver function. So glycine is great for that. Glycine also tends to help with blood sugar balance and lowering insulin resistance. It helps with our own connective tissues. When you're consuming collagen and the glycine that's in collagen, that's supporting your own tissues in your body. And there's also some really interesting research on how it can help support healthy blood pressure as well. So that's one of the major reasons that I like specifically meat on the bone broth. Meat, and also red meat as a whole, we're filling in a lot of different potential nutritional gaps in the diet. We're getting B12, we're getting iron, we're getting zinc. I think nowadays so many people are talking about creatine. You're getting a natural source of creatine in the diet. Turns out our reproductive tissues do actually benefit from creatine as well. There's actually a really interesting study looking at women's consumption of dietary creatine over time and the relative risk of various gynecological issues. And the group with the higher creatine intake had a lower rate of a number of different reproductive issues. I can't list them off the top of my head, but I did write a research brief on that over on my Instagram a few months back if people want to look that one up. So creatine is a really fascinating nutrient. It's cool that we're getting more information on it. I think most people tend to go straight to supplementation. I don't have anything against supplementation, but it's also worth mentioning that you do get natural creatine from your food, and specifically red meat tends to be one of the best sources.
I actually did not know that, and I'm learning new stuff. I love that. Okay, when I talk about bone broth, I feel like collagen always comes up. What's your thought on supplementing with collagen? People want to use it as a replacement for bone broth. What are your thoughts on that?
So in a way, it'll replace a lot of what you're getting from bone broth. Most of what you're getting from bone broth really is the collagen protein or the gelatin. Collagen and gelatin are the same thing, by the way. The collagen is a bit more broken down, so when your broth cools down, it won't gel, whereas gelatin will gel up like jello when it gets cold. But nutritionally, they're equivalent. Um, you're getting mostly that. So technically, a collagen supplement could take the place of bone broth. You're not going to get the mineral content that you may from broth. And
Hmm.
that is, it's up for debate. You'll see different nutrient analyses on different bone broth. Probably depends on the bones they started with, how long it was cooked, whether an acid was added during the cooking process, which helps get more of the minerals out of it. But you do get some minerals in there. You get some calcium, magnesium, potassium, phosphorus. So that you wouldn't get from a collagen supplement, but the collagen, the protein aspect, the majority of the protein that you're getting in bone broth is in the form of
Collagen.
collagen. Yeah.
Good to know. Okay, up next, fatty fish and seafood.
So fatty fish and seafood are really fabulous for fertility because they're high in so many different micronutrients. So iodine, selenium, DHA being a huge one. We'll talk about that in a minute. Zinc, choline, B12, even vitamin D. There's not many food sources of vitamin D, but fatty fish and seafood are one of them.
Hmm.
Probably of all of those nutrients, one of the most key ones that's difficult to get from other food, well, there's two. DHA would be the first one. Second would be iodine.
Hmm.
So DHA is an omega-3 fatty acid, really vital to our brain health and all sorts of things, but also fertility as well. So when we look at studies on ovarian aging, on egg quality, on anovulation, so missing ovulation, on sperm quality, you're going to see improvements in all of those aspects in individuals who are consuming enough DHA. And specifically, there's been some studies looking at seafood intake as a whole. And like couples who eat enough seafood, they get pregnant quicker than couples who don't consume seafood. And even if that is just 8 to 12 ounces of seafood per week, you see them get pregnant quicker. They call it
Hmm.
fecundability, and the study is a weird word, but it is what
Really?
it is. Um, so DHA is a huge one, really vital omega-3 fatty acid. You're not finding DHA in the same concentrations in any other food than you do in seafood. So I mentioned you can get a little bit in eggs, you can get a little bit in grass-fed beef and like game meat, for example, but you're really not getting concentrations of DHA anywhere close to seafood
Hmm.
anywhere else. So if you're not eating seafood, probably need to be supplementing with DHA separately. Um, the other one that I would mention would be iodine. So iodine is really key for ovulatory function. This is a tricky micronutrient to get because the number of food sources that it's in is fairly limited. Seafood is by far the most concentrated, and actually
Hmm.
seaweeds, algae, kelp are the most concentrated. But of course, fish and other animals in the sea will eat some of those and they get iodine from that. But if you can incorporate some seaweed, you go a long way toward getting your iodine needs.
Hmm.
Second to that, you're looking at dairy and eggs for iodine or what you happen to get in a supplement. So what we've been observing not only in the US but also in other countries as seafood, dairy, and egg intake declines, we're seeing iodine deficiency start to pop up a lot more. So people think, oh, iodine deficiency is not a thing in developed countries. It actually is. So when you go population-wide measuring urinary iodine concentrations, which is the way that we assess iodine status most frequently, you see about half of the US population, half of women of reproductive age, anyways, are deficient in iodine. And as you get more deficient in iodine, you start to have ovulatory issues, more likely to have PCOS, more likely to have delays in conception. So if we can get The seafood coming in, I like to see at least 12 ounces a week if people can. We're
Mhm.
hitting that DHA, we're hitting that iodine, and a slew of other nutrients as well. But those two being the biggest ones where if you're not eating that seafood, there's usually a micronutrient hole left in the diet that we need to address.
Okay, my favorite, especially to get my clients to eat because they rarely do full fat dairy.
Yeah. So dairy is, I mean, there's been a number of studies done on dairy product consumption and fertility, and pretty consistently they find that full fat dairy is the most supportive of fertility. Not only in ovulatory function, but also like in women who have undergone IVF, the greatest chances of success and pregnancy ending in a live birth, which of course is the outcome everybody wants who's undergoing IVF. You see that is much more likely to happen in the cohort that consumes full fat dairy. Low fat dairy does not have that same result necessarily in all of these studies. So what could possibly be going on here? Because the non-fat dairy still has many of the micronutrients that you find in dairy products. Really, the only thing that's missing is the fat and the
Mhm.
fat soluble nutrients. So it probably has to do with that. So dairy is a really vital source of a number of micronutrients. So some of them we'd find in like calcium, you'll find in both low fat and full fat dairy products, but the fat soluble ones like vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin K2, you're only finding in the fatty portion of the dairy products. So there was an interesting analysis of US diets that was looking at how much does dairy contribute to micronutrient intake? And it actually is pretty substantial. So like 47% of calcium is provided by dairy products. 42% of vitamin A is provided by dairy products, preformed vitamin A, by the way. 65% of vitamin D in the diet is from dairy products. And also, dairy was a major source of riboflavin and B12. So they are contributing to our micronutrient intake as well. And perhaps that explains some of the fertility benefits that we see. But yeah, there's an odd I don't know, there's an odd myth, I guess you could call it a myth floating around in the fertility world that dairy is inflammatory, so avoid dairy. And, that occasionally you'll have people who have intolerances or allergies or whatever. And of course, you'll need to just simply find alternative sources of those nutrients in the diet. It can be done. It can be a little tricky with some of them, like calcium gets a little bit tricky filling that void entirely with non-dairy foods. But for the most part, I don't find that it's inflammatory. You find that it is overall fertility supportive. So I encourage it if people can tolerate it. We do talk in Real Food for Fertility about different quality and processing of dairy products. Some people are much more sensitive to, they can only handle grass-fed A2 milk, or they can only handle goat or sheep's dairy and not cow milk. People have their own individual tolerances of it, but if you can find some type of dairy to fit in, we do find it's typically a net benefit to ovulatory function and fertility.
Yeah, and also delicious.
Yes, there's
One of
that
my
too.
favorite foods to eat. Okay, let's wrap up today with fermented foods and then anything else we can point them to the book to learn more. Fermented foods, why do you recommend consuming them?
So, a major reason is that they have friendly microorganisms like your probiotics in there that help with how well you digest and absorb your food. So, fermented foods tend to be easier to digest. So, we talk about dairy. Some people have issues with lactose from dairy products. Well, if it's fermented dairy products, sometimes they can tolerate them better because the lactose were
Mm.
consumed by the lactic acid bacteria, right? So that makes it far more digestible. There's also sometimes additional, I guess you call them byproducts of fermentation that are created as part of the fermentation process that actually makes those foods more nutritious. So sometimes the levels of certain vitamins actually goes up during the fermentation process. Sometimes the amount of protein in some things can go up as part of the fermentation process. And there's all sorts of other, I think they call them bioactives, but there's different byproducts of fermentation that can increase that tend to be a net benefit. Things that may improve your gut health, for example, or your nutrient bioavailability. Um, some fermentation, like if you're doing a traditionally fermented sourdough bread, and I'm pleased to see that we're in the era where people are now making their own bread. It's
No,
kind of
it's so great.
it's a full renaissance.
I
It's
think
pretty
it got
funny.
women eating bread again, like genuinely, like and eating good quality bread.
Yeah.
I has completely transformed women's relationship with bread.
Yes, totally. Everybody was so afraid of bread, so afraid of gluten. I'm so glad we're past that gluten-free. I think many of us had gluten-free stages. I was gluten-free for a number of years unnecessarily. I don't digest regular wheat all that well, but if it is good quality wheat and it's sourdough fermented, it sits super well, no issues, no reaction whatsoever. So some of the gluten actually does break down during the fermentation process, especially with a long fermentation. Wouldn't recommend it for somebody with celiac disease, but if you just have a slight gluten intolerance, it may make the bread more tolerable. It reduces the glycemic index of the bread. So, I mean, I've done CGM experiments where I'm wearing like a continuous glucose monitor and I'm having, my eggs and toast for breakfast so I could see whether it spikes my blood sugar or not. And it's like, for me, not saying this is everybody, for me, no spike,
Wow.
barely a blip. So the glycemic index, and this is all documented in the research, the glycemic index goes way down because guess what? Those bacteria and yeasts are feasting off of carbohydrates in the fermentation process. As a result, you get nice bubbles and your bread rises, but the carb quantity is actually going down a little bit. And then you have these byproduct acids and other things from the fermentation process that also help with reducing the glycemic load. So it's really kind of cool. But we see generally a net benefit to digestive health. The bacteria makeup in your body, your microbiome tends to improve when you're including some fermented foods. And we simply saw fermented foods in the diet for millennia, before we had refrigeration, fermentation was one of our major ways to preserve foods. So it really is, it shows up in different ways all over the world, but it really is a natural part of the diet. So whatever fermented food floats your boat, you don't have to eat all of them. So maybe it's yogurt or kefir, maybe it's kimchi or sauerkraut, maybe it's your sourdough bread as part of it, some sort of fermented salsa. There's endless variations on fermented foods out there.
Yeah. Kimchi is by far my favorite. I
Oh
can
yeah.
get down with some kimchi. I love it so much. Okay, there are a couple other groups of foods that you recommend. I'll point them to the book to learn more. Fruits and vegetables, electrolytes, and salt. Those are things to me too, though, that like my group of people don't really struggle with. You touched perfectly though on the ones that they would. And just a wrap-up question kind of to the foods that we just talked about. These are people who tend to be really fearful of eating a lot of fat in their diet. Why should they think to themselves, yay, let me eat a lot of liberal, healthy fat, saturated fat too? Why is that important for my fertility?
So with hypothalamic amenorrhea, we're tending not only to see insufficient energy intake, but we also tend to see an imbalance in macronutrient intake,
Mhm.
more often favoring, well, there's low energy intake as a whole, so I'm not saying they're getting sufficient amounts of these things, but we tend to see such a low fat intake that the majority of calories are coming in from carbohydrates and second to that, protein.
Yeah.
And it's not that those things are bad because you need them too, but you
Mhm.
also need the fat along with it. So my best recommendation is when you're eating your protein foods, just stop obsessively taking the fat out of everything, and then you're much more likely to get enough. So milk comes with fat for a reason, eggs come with yolks for a reason. Our chicken has skin. Yes, we can eat that delicious crispy skin. Our
Mhm.
steak has some fat in it. I mean, the things, the fatty fish and seafood, there's naturally fat in there. Avocados naturally have fat. Our nuts and seeds naturally have fat. No PB2 peanut butter powder. We need the fat that naturally is occurring in the foods.
Mhm.
Then you're getting the full complement of all of the nutrients and in the ratios that our bodies understand and need. So if you get your fat intake too low, they've done studies on this. They actually designed some studies in the late 1990s um, to restrict fat with the goal of lowering estrogen levels to hopefully lower the risk of breast cancer. You know, many breast cancers are estrogen responsive,
Mhm.
and they were successful. So, not in preventing the cancer necessarily, but they were successful in tanking out reproductive hormones. So, if you put somebody, a woman, on a low fat diet, the estrogen and progesterone levels can drop anywhere from 20 to 50%. So,
Wow.
with HA, we're already like the ovaries are not producing enough hormones right now. And
Mhm.
we need to be giving them the raw materials to make those hormones. And if we are not providing them a sufficient amount of fat and the cholesterol that we naturally get in foods of animal origin that also usually have saturated fat in there, uh, we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle with producing enough. So I find the thing that moves the needle the most in clients with HA is getting more dietary fat. You don't need to reduce any of the other things, but you need to add in more fat.
Yeah.
Sometimes we also need to focus on adding in more protein because I do tend to see more vegetarian leaning or plant-based leaning diets in individuals with HA, and it is often of net benefit if we bring in those foods. In
Mhm.
fact, I've had some women reach out to me who they said they've tried absolutely everything. They've worked with dietitians. They're doing all the things to try to get their cycle back. And the one thing that moved the needle was adding in more animal foods that have the fat intact.
Mhm.
Um,
And they also have
so
the protein too, though. So it's a win-win.
it's a win-win. Yeah, for sure. You do need that protein aspect as well, so I don't want to downplay that,
Yep.
especially because so many women with HA are athletic and very active.
Hmm.
And so that if that's you, it's very likely you need close to like 1 point, anywhere from 1.6 to even 1.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. So if you get all the way up to 2.2 grams per kilo, that's a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Whatever you weigh, eat that in grams of protein per day. Don't take the fat off of it, and you'll probably be in a pretty good place. You may benefit from a little extra butter on your veggies and add salad dressing to your salads and have some extra avocado in that too, but just taking the step of not obsessively removing it off of all the foods where it's naturally supposed to be, you may be surprised how quickly you'll see your cycle start to regulate.
Yes, so well said. Wrap up question for you. A philosophy we live by is wellness without obsession. As you can imagine, we tend to work with people who can be a bit obsessive about their health and wellness, but also, I love loving wellness. Like, it's fun to take care of yourself. We want to be active, healthy individuals for the rest of our lives. And getting your period back is obviously step one in that, right? Because it's restoring proper estrogen production. It's making sure you're truly healthy. You're getting your fifth vital sign. So we like to kind of encourage this idea of like, okay, then we can come back or we can embrace wellness, but just in this new way. So I always like to ask guests, how are you practicing wellness, but without obsession?
Mm. I like that question. I think people assume that I'm like hyper rigid about food, and I'm surprised it doesn't always come through in my writing because I always write about mindful eating. But you know, I like to allow room for treats. We can acknowledge like you can acknowledge something being nutritionally relevant or important or of significance. Like, okay, we have all these studies showing that added sugar is harmful, but there's
Mhm.
also a threshold at which these things become more harmful and a threshold below which they don't actually move the liver in a negative direction necessarily, and they add significantly to your quality of life and enjoyment and whatnot. So I can acknowledge that there's, you know, sugar's not great for me, and I can still choose to have some sugar Probably every day, to be honest. Like, there's usually a little bit of some treat coming in here or there. I have kids, if we're gonna go out for ice cream, I'm gonna have ice cream too.
Hmm.
I'm happy to have a little chocolate after dinner. I think it's okay to um, derive pleasure from eating. And that not only includes the healthy stuff that you're eating, but the stuff where you're like, this may not be the best thing for my body, but it's so enjoyable. Like, enjoy it and move on. Like, I have no guilt at all about my little treats here and there. So, try to find pleasure in your food as well, and I don't know, approach it with a little more lightheartedness and less obsession.
Yeah, we don't have to be like so serious about our diets. And I really appreciate you saying that because I just feel like people are so serious, especially when they are trying to get pregnant and they're struggling too and they have period loss. I just feel like people get so obsessive and so strict about things. I'm like, y'all, I eat something sweet every day of my life. It is
Right?
okay. And in fact, I would argue it's probably more beneficial for my health because I'm being present and mindful and usually doing it with my kids, like you said. And I just think there's space for many things to be included in health, including the enjoyment and satisfaction of food.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you need to, just like unfollow the talking heads on social media who are
The
like
dang talking heads.
yelling at you about the latest dietary boogeyman that's going to kill you. I mean, I almost can't handle being on social media anymore with the number of things that are going to kill me. I'm at the point where I don't even watch them anymore. I'm like,
Oh, I
scroll. Oh,
can't.
another person telling me I'm gonna die. Scroll. Yeah.
Yeah. I would be so curious what their actual daily lives are like though, right? Like I mean I wonder what if they have a healthy relationship with food, if they do, like do they actually eat some, they just don't share it, right? I always like to keep in mind, and I tell my clients this all the time, like it's marketing for all of us, right?
Oh,
Myself
it's
included, right?
marketing.
But like
Yeah.
they could be doing something completely different offline, but only portraying a certain image so that they can sell whatever product they're selling. So
Can
you
I
always have to like
can I actually
take
tell
it
you
with a
a
grain of
story
salt.
on that? Because
Yes.
so more than 10 years, was it 10 years ago? Yeah, 10 years ago, I presented at a conference this was when paleo was still a thing. It
Oh
was
my
like
God, paleo was like
paleo
so big about 10 years ago.
so
So
big.
big.
And I was presenting there, and it was in Texas, and a bunch of speakers went out to a meal after the conference, and we went to a Mexican restaurant. And we're talking, I'm not going to name names, but we're talking some of the biggest names, authors, like of the time in the paleo primal space. And I was thinking to myself, what are these people? First of all, can I order tacos because there's like corn tortillas, and are they going to judge me? And I really like refried beans, but I probably can't order refried beans in front of all these like paleo
Paleo
people.
people,
I'm like,
yeah.
what are they going to eat?
Thank God we've
And
gotten over that with beans. I'm so grateful.
right, yeah, the whole
Yeah.
legume thing. Legumes are a net benefit. Enjoy your legumes. But yeah, we sit down to eat. Everyone's eating freaking corn tortilla tacos and their beans and their sour cream, right? Because the paleo primal people were like, it was not only
Anti-dairy.
no grains, but it was no dairy and no legumes either. And they were eating all that stuff.
Well,
And
let
I
me
was
ask you
like,
this. Were they ever like, were they speaking that out loud or was everyone just silently being
everybody
like,
just like ordered normal food. And I was like,
I'm
okay,
so
I
glad you
guess
just shared that?
yeah, I guess we're doing this. I guess everybody's just eating normal food. And you were just on stage talking about
Yeah.
autoimmune paleo protocols or some not like, oh my gosh. So that was a very important lesson to me. I think at the time I was just coming off of, I think I had been gluten free for like 2 years. And I was like, you know what? This is kind of dumb. Sourdough's never bothered my stomach. I'm gonna add sourdough back in. Like I actually was never fully paleo primal. I always continued to eat dairy and legumes, but wheat was off the table for a while. And I was like, you know what? This is dumb. All these people are lying. They're
Yeah.
all lying.
I
Can you
cannot
believe
tell you how happy it makes me that you ended with that conversation. That was great. And I think what it will tell the people listening of like, hey, like seriously, like don't take that stuff so seriously.
Yes.
Just focus on what to add in. Everything else balances itself out. Don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Eat breakfast, get enough protein, don't take the fat obsessively off of all the things that naturally have fat. Eat to satiety. I mean, eat at regular intervals. If your appetite signals are all screwy from under eating for so many years, you might actually have to like
Yeah.
remind yourself to eat for a period of time until those
They
cues pick
often
up.
do.
They
They
often
often
do.
do.
That's why I mention it. But like we really don't have to make it as complicated as people make it. I always have to give a little bit of a caveat, I think, on my books, which are so data heavy, is that you have to remember I am up against the dietary guidelines and other professionals who are teaching the absolute opposite. I've got to back all my stuff with so many sources to not be completely taken out. Am I living my life citing studies as I'm eating different things? No, like the books kind of live as like a tome, they're like this resource of like, here's the evidence behind why this is logical. Like what you actually do in the kitchen, what's on your plate is far more simple. That's part of the reason I don't love meal plans, but that's why there's meal plans in there so that I'm putting food to all these words and data. You can actually see it in
Mm.
like balanced meals and snacks and what it would look like for a full day because I know information overwhelm is a real thing.
Yep.
But what you actually live is not as complicated as what's in a book. The book is like to prove a point, to be educational. Yes, there's data behind this, and then you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautifully said. Lily, thank you so much for your time coming on the show. Everybody who's watching, go get Real Food for Fertility. I could not advocate for it enough as the best book out there. It's honestly, I can't think of a single other book I recommend specifically for how to eat for fertility. So thank you so much for
Thank
putting this out in
you.
the world.
Yeah.
Lily, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you, my incredible community, for listening to this episode. If you want to learn more about Lily or potentially purchase her book, Real Food for Fertility, all of that will be included in our show notes. I want to leave off today's episode letting you know that we are currently booking for July and August spots for Premier Peer Recovery for Fertility. If you have a missing or an irregular period and you are ready to take charge of your health and your fertility so that you can get pregnant this year or in early 2027, we would love to work with you. You can learn more about our practice, apply, and schedule a decision-making call to see if it's a good mutual fit with the link in our show notes. We also have incredible bonus resources for you now included in the show notes, including free trainings, quizzes, blog posts, and so much more. You can also find all of that on our brand new website, nourishfertility.co. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We'll be back for another episode in 2 weeks for our second of 2 episodes in July. Until then, know that a nourished body is a powerful one.